This is King Noble Black Supremacy. And with this particular video, I want to talk about society's fear of the manifestation of the God-man factor. I want to call it the God-man factor. And I got to give you a little history to bring you up to speed. The God-man factor is when the power and the omnipotence of God manifests on earth through a man accessing their full and limitless possibility. A man accessing their divine potential and becoming supremely influential and powerful within this society, to the point that it throws off the system that's in place to maintain the power of certain groups, certain institutions, and certain ideologies. One of them you call democracy. Democracy is a scapegoat for a particular group of people in power versus individuals possessing, or an individual possessing, supreme power. They fear an individual possessing supreme power. Society as a whole fears that. So the system has been set up in place to suppress individuals from obtaining their divine potential, to access the God-man factor. The system of society has been set up to make people lazy, to be convenient, and to make you depend on these different groups, these different institutions, the system, i.e. the matrix, so that you depend on that, and that becomes your life source, life support. That becomes your life source. And that's what you become comfortable with. That's your comfort zone. And it makes you think that's better than the God-man factor. They tell you when you grow up to be all that you can be, that you should access your potential. What do you want to be when you grow up? But they don't mean that. They have it rigged what you're going to be systematically. And what you're going to be is not going to topple the groups, the establishments, and the institutions that are already in power. What they have for you to be runs along the lines of what these systems and institutions dictate. They want to suppress you coming into the divine power as an individual. Now, everybody can't even come into this divine power and probably won't. But they have to suppress everybody in order to prevent the God factor from manifesting on earth. Because when it manifests, it will cause a radical shift in the consciousness and in the paradigm of society. That means whoever making money, who's ever capitalizing off where people are systematically, will no longer be able to capitalize there. These groups that have been organized by men will fall apart when the God factor, the God-man factor manifests on earth. And they know this. So they have systematically done everything that they can to neutralize this. They have made society as a whole afraid of the God-man factor, an entity that would manifest absolute power on the earth. which is the only thing that could solve the problems of humanity, which is the only thing that can truly evolve consciousness and evolve society, is that being, through accessing their unlimited potential, becoming that absolute, becoming that God factor to change everything. They fear change. The God-man factor represents change. So they make everybody fear individuals gaining too much power. They fear the idea of a man with absolute power. The world feels this. The world fears this. This is a global phenomenon. They make you feel more comfortable with groups and organizations of men who, with all of their energy, input, and intelligence, do not add up to the power that a God man possesses, can obtain, and can utilize for the well-being and the transformation of humanity as a whole. But they have society thinking that we need to be against this, and that's how they invented democracy. They invented democracy to protect people from their fear of the God-man's factor, which is really what the world needs. They don't tell you that it's impossible for human beings to be unified and organized in a way that is going to really advance society to a higher level. They don't tell you that. They make you believe that we can unify and we can organize and we can work together and we can come to the table, and that groups can achieve more than the God-man factor can. That's an illusion and that's a lie. But they eat off of our disorganization. They eat off our confusion. They eat off us being scattered. They eat off of our individualism and our individual desires. And the God-man factor would put all that into perspective, because that will be the individual with the amount of intelligence, the amount of charisma, the amount of divine energy to change it all, to impact it all, to create real change, to transform this planet as we know it. They're the only one that can do it. But if you want to stay in power, if you want to capitalize off confusion and chaos, then you have to stop that one entity from manifesting on the earth. And you must suppress many to make sure that they are not the one, that they are not him. And you have to use tactics, and you have to use strategies, and you have to stop the God-man factor from manifesting by any means necessary. And that is what they are doing today all around the world. Men who tap their power, who are gaining more power and more resources and more followers than governments, are being stopped, are being defamed, are being assassinated, are being incarcerated, are being murdered, because they fear that any of these men could be the God-man factor, the enlightened being, the sum totality of all human intelligence embodied into one entity, and that they would use that intelligence, or the very existence of that intelligence, will offset society, will offset their constructs, their structures, will mess with their money, will mess with their resources, their land. Their system will be destroyed by the embodiment of the superior intelligence of the universe in man. They must suppress that. They must make up laws, rules, regulations, and codes to stop the God-man factor from manifesting. It could be anybody at any time. They know that. It won't be everybody, and it won't be anybody, but they have no way of identifying it. But the only way they can prepare or try to intervene is trying to stop everybody all at once by setting limits for everybody. And they know by limiting everybody that they're ultimately going to limit the right one who could come and change it all, who could come and overthrow it all, who can come and end all the bullshit and bring about true transformation on this planet Earth. In our so-called Black conscious community, it was called the rise of the Black Messiah. When we talk about J. Edgar Hoover and the COINTELPRO, they want to stop the rise of a Black Messiah. What we don't understand is it has nothing to do with the rise of a Black Messiah. It has nothing to do with race, geography, culture. That it's beyond that. It's the God factor. They fear it all around the world. They fear it within their own race, within their own society. They fear man gaining so much power. An individual having so much power that it changes everything that they know. They fear the apocalypse or Armageddon that will be activated by an individual who is allowed to tap into the divine potential and the divine intelligence of the all in all that could change it all. We talk about natural catastrophes and diseases and destruction and nuclear warfare, but they don't tell you what in man that they fear. They fear the day that God would return in man and gain the type of power that would throw off the society that they have been capitalizing for so long. They have turned man against man through groups. Republicans against Democrats. Right against the left. They have turned man against man, and it has worked to their advantage. And they let men get power as long as those men represent those groups that maintain that power structure of the elite. But if you gain power outside of that structure, outside of that system, you will represent the end of that system and the end to those who have capitalized off of that system. They fear the God-man factor all over the world. They fear the day that God will be realized in a man who would take over, who would implement, who would truly change what they have worked to build and create for hundreds and thousands of years. It's not about gender. I say God, man. But it's not about gender. It's about supreme intelligence embodied in human consciousness and fully realized and expressed in a being who in that seat of power, who sits on that throne, would change it all, would change the whole thing in its entirety, and would overthrow those in powers and their principalities and their ideas and their constructs. This being would overthrow it. His intelligence and his access to unlimited potential and ability to achieve unlimited and absolute power on this earth would destroy society and socialization and the framework of this matrix as we know it. They fear that day, and they must destroy all men or any men that look like they're coming into the semblance of that reality. It's not about race. It's beyond race. It's beyond nationality. It's beyond nation building. It's just certain nations are the originators of that embodiment of that absolute power embodied in man, specifically the black race or the African race. We had the most powerful men within the African race that has ever existed within time, that has ever existed. That having God men among us and embodied within our societies and our tribes was our cultural paradigm, and it's why we ruled the world for so many hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of trillions of years, because we had the God-man factor within our race. We overstood it, we respected it, we revered it, and we ruled. And it is the nature of the indigenous people, the black people, the melanated people, to have God man embodied within their nation and within their community. It is our nature. We don't function as groups, as democracies, as organizations of men. We function best with God man among us, with God man in power. We have ruled the 7 seas, and we will rule again. But it's not limited to nationalism, because they fear the manifestation of God man to the point that their attempts to stop it has become far beyond, has exceeded far beyond attacking a particular nation or group of people or gender, even though the God factor can manifest and is manifesting as a man in this day and time, as a being in this day and time, as a gender in this day and time. Society has been set up to stop that, because everybody will eat differently when that God factor manifests. The world will be completely different. So they have set up systems to stop the God men, to stop the God man from coming into power. Because once that God man manifests, all energy and consciousness of the universe will be directed through one entity into the transformation of this particular planet. All the energy through one entity will be directed to human evolution. They want you to think there's more power in the group, and the group is better, and that these organizations are better, and that government in a certain way is better than the God-man factor. And they're lying to you. That governments are filled with so much bureaucracy and confusion that only certain classes of people will be able to eat and have a utopia within this society. But when you have a God-man, the problems of this world will be solved instantly. The problems within the societies will be fixed instantaneously, without bureaucracy, without debate, without argument, without confusion, without complex forms of legislation. Problems will be fixed on the earth instantly. But since people eat off these problems, they fear the day that the God-man factor would manifest. We have built a consensus reality in this society today of fear of the God-man factor. So when we see individuals gaining too much power, too much intelligence, too much consciousness, too much resources, too much influence, then we must take them down. Because we fear that the God man will rule again on this earth. Call it a theocracy. Call it a theocratic monarchy. Call it whatever you want. That God man will rule again and set the earth in place and evolve this planet. And not human consciousness, but all human activity. This is King Noble Black Supremacy. Join my website, www.kingnobleuncensored.com.